Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode.
In today's episode, I look back at a crazy wildcard weekend in the NFL. In a weekend that had 12 league changes, I look back at a crazy game between the Panthers and the Rams.
We always think, they're going to come back next year, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. It's not a guarantee, that's the beauty of the NFL.
I also look back at the Bears' comeback win against the Packers, as well as the 4 other games on wildcard weekend.
If they'd gone for those first 3 attempts, they'd gone for the field goals, that's 9 points, and that would have been a 40-27 win.
Hope you all enjoy.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I am, as ever, your host today, Andy Davis, and it's just me as I review the wildcard round of the 2025 season's playoffs. And what a weekend it was. It was just, I think this weekend was, for me, purely wildcard round, one of the best I've seen. A couple of games that were a bit one-sided, but the first 4 games we got were something that we rarely see in the wildcard round, because there's been a whole thing in recent years about the wildcard round and sort of it being a bit a lot of rubbish games, a bit of meh games. I think there's been a lot of debate brought up by fans to say, this is what you get when you get 7-seeded teams in the playoffs and all that. But I think this weekend completely erased that sort of narrative around the playoffs and about having a wildcard round. And I personally was not really in favour of having an extra 7th team, just because I'm always of the opinion of if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of mentality. Because there have been some games in the past, but there was the Eagles Buccaneers game in 2021 season that was naff, and let's be real, there was some rubbish games. The last 2 weren't that great, but what we got in the first 4 games was just something that I think it is being unprecedented. Divisional round, conference championship, there's been some of the best playoff games in history have been the divisional round, not necessarily the Super Bowl. But no, we have now got our teams now to face off in the divisional round. There was 12 lead changes in the 4th quarter alone in this weekend. So all round, one hell of a weekend. But it started off in Carolina on Saturday as the Panthers, as the 4 seed, took on the 5th seed Los Angeles Rams. And I think we can all say no one expected that kind of game. The Rams won. We all expected that, but I think for me, it was the way the game went down. For me, was not at all what anyone expected. It was in the end a 34-31 win for the Rams over the Panthers. And one thing I will say as well, that the first 3 games as well, the team that were up at the 2-minute warning in the 4th quarter didn't win the game, and this includes Carolina. They, I think, shocked everyone. I think we all thought going into the game it was going to be an easy Rams win, maybe Rams by 10. We did a little thing in our house, predicting, who we thought would win the game and by how much. I said Rams by 17. That's how confident I was in the Rams, beating the Panthers. I think, going into that game, the Rams weren't in great form. They had a bad recent stretch of form, but then kind of win against the Cardinals. Stafford had 4 touchdowns, 0 picks. I think I personally thought that it would be, the confidence boost that maybe all teams would need going into a playoff game. And I think the Panthers going into it, they lost their last 2 games. They lost against the Buccaneers. We got in through, really through the Buccaneers collapsing in that final 8 games, but also through the loss for the Saints over the Falcons. So, the Panthers, for me, I didn't have much faith in, but I was really surprised. I was really surprised with how they got on. I mean, they did have a muffed kick return. Thankfully for ETN, it didn't matter too much because they did end up turning over on downs that subsequent play. But I thought there was a point in the game where I think we all thought it was going to be that kind of game for the Panthers. I mean, when that muffed return happened for ETN, it was 17-7 to the Rams. And you're thinking, the Rams had the ball to start the second half, and you're thinking, right, they could score on this play, make it 24-7, and they score on the next play on the first play of the second half, and you could be looking at a 31-7 game. But the turnover on downs was huge. I mean, Stafford went for it on 4th and 3 at the Carolina 19. I thought they might have gone for it on that. So they might have gone for the field goal on that instead of going for it. But thankfully for them. Thankfully for the Panthers, they held on, and then they scored a touchdown on the next play. So that made it a 17-14 game going into the half. And then second half begins, and I can't remember what point of the second half, or even was it the first half, Matt Stafford had the injury to his hand. But ever since that hand injury happened, there was a play where he threw to his man, and then someone caught his hand whilst after throwing the ball, just sort of caught up in the motion of it all. He didn't seem the same. Didn't seem the same at all. And from that point onwards, it took them really from the start of the third quarter until around about the 5:47 mark in the fourth quarter. The Rams had just 3 points to show for it, and that was it. Whereas the Panthers, when the fourth quarter began, had made it 24-20 to them. When the 2-minute warning did happen, they were leading the game. For me, obviously the Rams go on and win the game. Colby Parkinson had the winning touchdown, but for me, there was a lot more I think Panthers fans can be happy about. Now, of course, we've seen it happen before. We've seen teams do this. We've seen teams have these amazing little Cinderella stories, or they get in, sneak into the playoffs, and they surprise everyone in the wildcard round. And we always think, they're going to come back next year. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. It's not a guarantee. That's the beauty of the NFL. Especially if you win your division and you get in as the 4th seed like the Panthers have, you'll get a harder schedule next year. And then who knows what happens in the future. As I said before, they got in technically, basically on a technicality of the Panthers, of the Buccaneers even, slipping up and struggling down the stretch. Panthers weren't looking like they were going to do anything in this season in week 12, week 11. So for me, they've got to be careful not to get their hopes up too much, because I think, I expect the Buccaneers to be improved next year. I expect them to go back to what they were before. They have made some changes in the coaching staff since the coordinators. Grizzard is out, and as well as the Falcons. They're on the team's link to John Harbaugh. If they can get John Harbaugh in, that's just such a generational hire. You add in the fact you've got a young quarterback like Penix. You've got young compared to other quarterbacks. I think he had quite a lot of time in college, but you think about Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, if he can make it more consistent than just this season gone. So and then the Saints, Tyler Shuck had a great stretch down the last few games, and you expect them to make some moves in the off season. So you think about the NFC South, it still is for me the worst division in NFL, but the Panthers aren't guaranteed to make it back again. So whilst we can all sit here and go, it was an encouraging display, they'll be back next year, think of the future. That's not guaranteed for the Panthers. There's a reason why they've not made the playoffs before this season in 10 years. So this team has a history of making bad decisions behind the scenes, draft picks, free agency. So I'm not. I would love to sit here and say, Panthers are gonna, be back next year and they can learn from this in the next playoff game. There's no guarantee they're going to be back. So, but I've got to give them a lot of credit either way. I thought Bryce Young completely outdid expectations. I mean, there was one point in the game where the amount of pressure he was getting was just crazy. It was, there was an obscene amount of pressure coming from this Rams defense, and you've got to give the Rams defensive line credit for that. And how they managed to stifle Bryce Young for a lot of that first half. But then Bryce Young just came alive, and he had made some great plays on third down. There was that one scrambling play, went in for a touchdown. And I think at that point you thought, oh boy, they could actually do this. Turns out it wasn't meant to be, but I think either way, whether they're back or not next year, I don't know. But either way, they can be proud by the effort they made, and they can be happy with the performance they put in, when I think a lot of people had them down to lose this game against what a team that has been and probably still is people's favourites to win the Super Bowl, even though they're the 5th seed. I think they perform excellently well. And I say about before, it's going to be a harder schedule next year. The Rams are a hard team to play, and they did well against them, and they almost beat them. But it just wasn't meant to be. But the Rams move on. One of those kind of performances where you think, just get out there if you can. Just make sure you get out there with a win. I think the performance was not great second half, but I think that was down to Stafford's injury. Now, this leaves the question as to, their next playoff game. Is he going to be fully right? That could be an advantage to, spoiler alert, the Bears. But, if he's back to what he was before that hand injury, I think they'll be a team to look out for. Certainly, they're still my Super Bowl pick. They're still my pick to win it. But I think they're going to face much harder opposition next week. Well, in 4 days' time, in the Chicago Bears, who did win their game on the same day as the Rams, as they beat the Packers, their longtime rivals, in this game, and they won by a score of 31-27. What a game that was! That was, for me, that was the game of the weekend. That really was the game of the weekend for me. It was a game where there were so many changes. I mean, the Packers were 21-3 up at the half. I think we all thought in this game, that was it. The Bears were going to be shocked by their rivals. And I had the Packers winning this game. We all did. Both me, Sam, and Keg all had the Packers winning in our predictions in our NFC wildcard preview. And I thought, Caleb Williams looked completely lost in his first playoff game. I think we've seen it happen before a lot of times. These quarterbacks have these amazing seasons, make their first playoff game, and they struggle immensely. And that's what was happening for a lot of this game for the Bears and Caleb Williams. And there was some horrific fourth down play from the Bears. I mean, I wanted to talk about this. I mean, they won for them, thankfully, in the end, which didn't matter too much. But you think about what happened in the first half for the Bears. You think about 4th and 6 in the second quarter, 12 minutes, 23 left. They go for it on 4th at the Green Bay 40. Could have gone for a field goal there. Especially at that point, it was 14-3. But 14-6 isn't the worst scoreline in the world to have in a playoff game. Still a lot of time left to go. Only the start of the second quarter. You think at this point, just take the points, no pun intended. And then the next time, 5 minutes 19 left on the clock. Chicago 32, 4th and 5. They go for it again. Try to find Luther Burden. Couldn't find him. And then still in the second quarter, 37 minutes left on the clock. Tries to find Colson Loveland. It didn't work out. Going on to the third quarter, at this point, they're 21-6 down. At that point, you kind of think, okay, maybe they probably should have gone for it. It was at the Green Bay 6. So, you think about, okay, at this point in the game, they probably should be going for field goals. They should go for the touchdowns because there isn't much time left on the clock. But even with the first 3 I just mentioned, if they just gone for a field goal, taken the 3 points, they would have had much more of an easier lead to have, because the Packers still needed a touchdown to win the game in that final drive. We think about if he'd gone for those first 3 attempts, they'd gone for the field goals, that's 9 points. And that would have been a 40-27 win. Obviously, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because the Bears ultimately won. But 9 times out of 10, they lose that game. And I think I was writing my notes in the game, and that was the main narrative in the first half I was trying to go with. Just go for the points sometimes. I think people try and be too cute. They try and, follow the crowd and go foot and forth. Every team seems to be doing it these days. But I think in a big game like this, just take the points, especially in the first half when you still got a lot of time left in the second half. For me, they could be going into that half as well. What would that be? That would have been 21-12. That's not the worst scoreline to go into half time with. So for me, yeah, it was all round horrendous first half of the Bears. There was even a quote from I can't think who was the announcer. Was it Troy Aikman? But they said internal or external cuteness can do you in, and that's exactly what we were seeing from the Bears in that first half. I thought the defense was not holding up. I thought the Packers played a great game first half, and I think we all thought at one point they were going to win this game, but then the Bears came to life in this game. It was a tremendous second half performance. And the Packers themselves only scored 6 more points the entire second half, but you saw the third quarter, they go for the field goal, interception, and then field goal, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Whereas the Packers in the second half, it was punt, 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 touchdown, missed field goal, end of game. And the missed kick from Brandon McManus was huge. I talked about just then about, go for it, go for the field goal. That might just completely disprove my point about going for the field goal rather than going for it. But yeah, the Packers may not have scored, but they might have at least gotten to field goal range. And looking at where they were on the field, it was to Chicago 28. So McManus has a lot of people calling out for him after the game, and I don't like to see anyone get social media abuse. But for him, it was rather unfortunate because, and also he missed the kick earlier in the game as well, an extra point. So really, that's 4 points that they lost out. So they could have easily been level in this game, and they could have then gone on and got the field goal, won the game, or at least gone to overtime. So yeah, that's going to hurt McManus for a long time. But the Bears, they move on. They take on the Rams next at home. I believe certainly it's a Sunday game. And I believe it's the second of the 2 of the Sunday games in divisional round. But yeah, either way, it was just a tremendous game. I think that for me, that defines what NFL playoffs is. You're never out. You are never out of a game at any point. You think about it was the largest comeback in the playoffs for a team who are, I think, 21 points down in a game since the Super Bowl 51 between the Falcons and the Patriots. I thought Caleb Williams, that one play he made on 4th down where he sort of span around the pressure, sort of found, I believe it was Colson Loveland, it might have been DJ Moore on a 4th down play. And I felt like that play particularly just completely changed the narrative of this game. It completely changed, the momentum. It got the fans up. And I think from that point on, the Bears never really looked back. They made history as well. It was the first time since 1988 that a rookie tight end has had over 100 receiving yards in a game. That was felling to Colston Loveland. And the Bears have a lot to be happy about. Now, they'll want to play better than that against the Rams. They're not going to every game be able to come back from that sort of lead that they're down by. So the Bears have a lot to work on. But, I think what we've seen a lot this season, mirror image to the Commanders last year, is this Bears team are never down and out. You can never write them off. And I think against this Rams team, who did struggle in this game, and as I said before, we don't know how Stafford will be in terms of his hand come that game, but they're at home as well. For me, the Bears have a chance. Now, I will mention my prediction later on in the week, but spoiler alert, I do think the Rams beat the Bears. So they're going to be probably people's underdogs still, even though they're at home. But they've got a great chance here. They're the second seed. Obviously, they'll take on the Seahawks if the Seahawks win. But if the Seahawks lose to the 49ers, which I think could happen, potentially, then they could be a home team in the NFC Championship game. Bears fans, this might be your best chance in a long time to make the Super Bowl. But it's a long way to go. But either way, what a performance from the Bears. The Packers, I think, this one will hurt for a while. The floor has been called out by fans to be fired. Hasn't been. I think there's talk of him staying on. But that loss is going to really hurt. And I think if the Packers start to struggle next year, I don't know, they're 2-6 or they have a few bad years, then this game will be talked about as the reason why. And you think about the Falcons, people always say they never really recovered from that loss against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. This could be the same for the Packers for a few years. Jordan Love, the floor, all the players around them. Obviously, Micah Parsons being injured probably is a main reason they lost. I think if they had Micah Parsons in this game, they might have been a higher seed, first of all, but they might have also won this game. So for me, it's tough for them. But I think as a 7th seed, I think they were always seen as the underdogs in this playoff. I think people, like myself, were predicting them to potentially win this game, but then not win another playoff game after it this year. It was a one team I think we all thought they could beat, apart from maybe the Panthers. But no, that one will hurt. That one will hurt for the Packers. But moving on to our Sunday slate. Before we get on to, we are sort of short of time, but I'm going to quickly run through a few of the games on Sunday that maybe weren't as talkative. I mean, you had the Patriots beat the Chargers 16-3 on Sunday Night Football, and the Texans beat the Steelers in potentially Aaron Rodgers' last game as an NFL player by 30-6. I mean, 2 points on these games. First of all, on that Texans Steelers, I mean, Rodgers, it wasn't a great performance from him. But his last touchdown pass will still be that pass to Calvin Austin to make them division champions. So I think in a way that's kind of fitting, that rather than like a touchdown in garbage time, 40 seconds left, you're down by that would have been 14, 15 points they'd been down by. But the Texans defense is scary. CJ Stroud had probably his worst game of his career. If not, it's at least one of the worst games of his career. Only had one touchdown in this whole game. But the Texans still scored 30 points. And that was down to an amazing defense. Of course, the run game as well. Woody Marks, 112 yards, one touchdown. But to have, one interception and 4 sacks from this defense was just insane. Only needed one field goal as well. This Texans team is legit. I said they're going to make the Super Bowl in my TikTok video I did recently on Andy Talks NFL. But I think this defense is scary, and I think they're going to take this team a long way. And then Patriots, Chargers. I think the Patriots were not that great, but the Chargers were even worse. Herbert was simply terrible. He was simply awful. 3 playoff games now, 3 losses, and Herbert had no touchdowns, only 159 passing yards all game long. It was awful. It was you think about the loss to the Jaguars where they collapsed, the loss to the Texans last year where he had more interceptions in one game than the entire of the regular season combined. But this, for me, was up there with one of his worst performances. He just looked lost, and this narrative is only going to get stronger unless he starts winning playoff games. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen get a lot of that playoff choker narrative, but they won playoff games. They've reached championship games. They've gone way further than Herbert ever has in the postseason. He has been awful in all 3 of these games. So the Chargers, for me, yeah, they were the 7th seed. Yeah, they were the underdogs against the 2nd seed, against the MVP candidate. But still, for me, it was a really awful performance. And then finally, the last 2 games on Sunday saw the Bills beat the Jaguars by 27-24, and the 49ers beat the Eagles 23-19. I think 49ers Eagles, I want to touch on this very quickly. Kyle Shanahan, again, must be a Coach of the Year candidate. I think he's looking with Ben Johnson, with Mike Vrabel, Liam Cohen as these kind of candidates. But the job he's done, Kyle Shanahan, despite the injuries, I've mentioned this before, so I won't go into it too much. But to do it again when this game was the hardest to predict, but I think the Eagles still had the edge because they were at home, they were the third seed, 49ers injuries, but McCaffrey ended up being the star of the show. 2 touchdowns in this game. Brock Purdy in this game had 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Fair wasn't his best game, threw a few costly picks, but there was that play from Juwan Jennings who made the pass to Christian McCaffrey for one of his touchdowns in the game. Insane. I want to shout out friend of the show, Will Gavin, for his amazing commentary on this game, and it's actually become quite viral. Even the 49ers have they've made reference to it, and they put on their social media account. But for Niners, they move on. The Eagles, it's the end of the road. I think AJ Brown probably is going to be out the door. His body language was terrible in this game. Barkley, brought back some of his playoff magic from last year, 106 yards, but couldn't get a touchdown. And in the end, Eagles go out. But I think if you asked the Eagles fans 2 years ago, if we offered you a Super Bowl win and a wildcard round exit in back-to-back years, would you take it? I guarantee you, 99% of fans would have taken that, if not 100%. So for me, it's just, their season wasn't that great. They won the division, fair enough, for the first time a team did it back-to-back since the noughties, in the early noughties at that. But, you can't deny they have been bad, and really they were, one of the worst division winners this season in the entire NFL. But the Niners move on, as do the Bills. They beat the Jaguars in another crazy game with multiple, lead changes. If you look at the overall scoreline, it was a win by 27-24 for the Bills. So the Jaguars gave as good as they got. And there were, again, this is another game that had multiple lead changes. I mean, looking at sort of the start of the fourth quarter, it went from 10-7 in the end of the second quarter to 17-13 to the Jags at the start of the fourth quarter. Then it went 20-17 to the Bills, 7 minutes remaining, 24-20 to the Jags, 2:20 remaining, and then 57 minutes left in the game. Bills made it 27-24. Now, we are short on time, but a quick thing on this. The Bills, for me, I said they'd lose to the Jags. I said they would lose to the Jags, unlike Sky and Freddie in our AFC preview episode. But the Bills, for me, they've got a tough task against the Broncos. But I think it was their first road win in the playoffs since '92. This team, I think, actually could be a team that goes far. Now, against the Broncos defense, that's as good as the Jags, probably better than the Jags. They've got a tougher task, but they proved they can go up against elite defenses. So for me, I think this Bills team, despite being the road team in this game, they're going to be the road team for the rest of the playoffs. The fact they've gone out and won a game on the road, I think it's a massive confidence booster to that team. And I think they'll want to, they'll want to do better than that. They'll want to have a more of a better lead. But against the one seed is always going to be tough. But I think this is the best chance a team has had in years of beating the one seed. I think even look at the time when the Titans were the one seed, they lost to the Bengals, who were, I believe they were the sixth seed as well, or maybe the fifth seed. And they were awful. And I think this Bills team, I think, obviously weapons-wise is not as good as the Bengals, but in terms of an overall package, overall team, overall coaching, overall quarterback, you can argue one way or the other. But I think this Bills team is better than the Bengals, and they can certainly go out and beat the Broncos. In my opinion, they can. Not saying they will, but they can. I think this team, if they can go out and win against the Broncos on the road, and their nemesis is not there in Mahomes, there's no Jackson, there'll be no Burrow. It will just be either, who's the team left? It'll be either the Texans or the Patriots. I think they fancy their chances. Texans, defense is bad, but if they can stop Stroud and they can have some sort of success, Josh Allen gives trouble to that Texans defense. And against the Patriots team, a team they have beaten already this year, almost beat the other time. I think they got a chance. They won in Foxborough as well. So I think they'll want to play the Patriots more than the Texans, if I'm honest. Even though the Pats are a higher seed. Yeah, I think for me the Bills will look on. And I think the Jags, a bit like the Panthers, they can be really proud of themselves. But I think for the Jags, I think they will feel this is a missed opportunity. I really do, because I think the Texans will be there. I don't see the Colts improving that much next year, or the Titans for that matter. But again, to be the third seed and you're winning a game with less than 2 minutes left on the clock, that one's going to hurt for a long time. It really is. It really is. Lawrence had a difficult game, which he did have in that one playoff win he had before the Chargers just gave him that victory. So Lawrence again struggles in the big moments, and that's something we have to be. If it happens again next year, a bit like Herbert, we've got to talk about it. But either way, great season for them. Liam Cohen, unbelievable first year as a head coach. But sadly, not to be. And that is where we will end this show for today. So first of all, thank you all for listening in what has been a shorter episode than normal. But time constraints has meant that this has been the case. But don't forget as well, if you are new to the show, don't forget to use code Andy5 at checkout at fantasygameday.app. But in the meantime, thank you all for listening. This has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I have been, as ever, your host today, Andy Davis, and we'll see you guys next time for AFC and NFC divisional rounds previews. Take care.